You're watching Book View Now, and I'm Jeffrey Brown, your host, and this is a panel I've been looking forward to because it takes us not only out of the studio, but out of Miami and out of the United States, around the world. We're going to travel to Tel Aviv, Tehran, and Singapore to talk about books in the Noir series. We have three of the editors here. I'm joined by Cheryl Tan, who edited the book on Singapore, Assaf Gavron from Tel Aviv, and Salar Abdoh from doing the Tehran Noir series. So why don't you start with that Tehran? What were you trying to bring out?
There were two issues that I had about Tehran, and one is just Tehran, Iran's place in the world geographically, yes, surrounded by intense wars in the past decade and a half, and also being in the middle of the vast drug trade that begins from Afghanistan, goes to Europe, and also the refugees of the various wars, Afghans, Iraqis, and such, that live in Tehran and work there as laborers and other occupations. So there was that to show the various layers of Tehran, a city of 15 million and expanding all the time. And on the other hand, to try to get the writers to write really gritty realism that they're not used to writing. And the reason for that is that censorship in Iran is pretty heavy. And it goes back before the revolution of '79. So that sort of censorship has caused them to write sort of in ways that to skirt the censor. And when you write like that, you can't really write about this kind of stuff. You can't have too many bad guys, you can't have sex scenes. Or if you do it, you have to do it in a roundabout way. And I wanted to really skirt all of that. And that was my big challenge.
So, so Cheryl, in Singapore, maybe it's a different sort of challenge. I mean, you're writing about the dark underbelly of a place that in popular imagination, at least, is clean and ordered.
That's true. And that was the big reason I wanted to do Singapore Noir, because in all the years I've lived in the US, I grew up in Singapore, but I moved here for college and I never went back. And in all my years here, every time I mention Singapore, people will always say, oh, that place with all the rules and caning and you can't chew gum. And it's really boring, isn't it? Nothing ever happens there. But that's really not true. Every time you have like a little island, right now there's more than 5 million people on it, people of different races, socioeconomic backgrounds, you're bound to have dark pockets here and there. So I really wanted a book that would kind of explore that and bring that to life in a way that might not be explored so frequently in Singapore as well, because Singaporean writers face the same sort of censorship there. So when I got these authors together, I said, when you're writing this, make sure you kind of think about the fact that this is published in the States first. It's also published in Singapore now, but it's published in the States first.
And Tel Aviv?
Well, Tel Aviv is much smaller than Tehran, and even from Singapore it's less than 1 million population. But the challenge I had there is a little different because in a way we are steeped in violence all the time. And and everyone goes to the army and is trained and knows how to use weapons and all that. So we needed to kind of find a place to explore the underworld, but having that in mind. So we took a more kind of free kind of a version of noir, and we told our writers, and I'm saying we because I co-edited with Etgar Keret, another Israeli writer. And asked them, give us anything that explores the darker side of the city. It doesn't have to be a crime, a murder investigation in the classic noir expression.
Well, I was wondering that because, I mean, were you given a definition, we're all given a definition of noir, or you have some freedom as editors to say, okay, this fits my definition?
Yeah, we did have this freedom, and I think, got to admire Akashic, who's the publisher and published all these 70 or so noir collections, for giving this kind of freedom for each city to find its own noir flavor.
So when you said you had to, I don't know if it's convince the writers, I mean, was it hard to, these are, the stories are things that they all see, but the issue there was sort of actually writing it down, bringing it out?
Sure, it's not being used to write in a realistic way a lot of the times. but coupled with that, just the notion of censorship was so difficult to contend with at first that I really thought about not doing it. I hesitated for a while, and then let's take it from you. Then I'll come back because I lost my train of thought.
Has the book come out in Iran?
Oh, it's not. It's never going to come out in Iran unless there's serious changes in Iran. But I had a definite notion of what noir is, and it goes back to the classic notion of what American noir is, the classic gritty realism of, but not sort of the hard-boiled detective fiction that many people sometimes mistakenly think of noir. Noir has those aspects, but I was thinking of noir as a sense of failure and bleakness. And God knows Tehran is full of those kind of stories. So I had to approach the writers and sort of make them understand that you have to deal with reality here. Don't eschew it. Don't beat around the bush. Don't change vocabulary. And that made it a very long process. These stories went back and forth many times, and I decided to translate them myself because in translation I also had an opportunity to again edit these pieces. So it came out really well, and it shows the different layers of Tehran that people really don't know about.
Yeah. I mean, that's a challenge for all of you, right? To bring, well, you were saying, to bring out a different kind of Singapore.
Yeah.
Did you have a sense of noir? Did you tell those?
I had a lot of discussions with my writers about what noir is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I said, you know, it's sort of the classic thing, you know, good versus evil. You know, someone who fundamentally tries to be good but makes, you know, is faced with a questionable decision to make. The femme fatale. We talked about the different kinds of noir. So I think, you know, a lot of the stories in here are sort of touch on that a little bit. And noir, as explored in Singapore, spiritualism and gods and spirits are very big in Singapore. And so there's a little bit of that in some of the noir stories in Singapore Noir too, and that's wonderful. It's like there's a little hint of black magic in one. In one of them, the protagonist is a PI, a private investigator, who her day job is she's a medium in a Chinese temple, and her job is to channel the monkey god spirit and like tell people what to do with their lives. And so characters like that, I think, you know, that the writers really kind of took the idea of noir and ran with it and went like, okay, how it does manifest itself in Singapore, you know, in this Chinese temple with the monkey god, this feng shui master who turns into a detective. So that's kind of a sort of the varied noir that you'll find in here.
You know, many Americans, as you say, don't know much about the inner workings of all these cities other than what we see on the front page. Many Americans certainly don't know much about the writing scenes. And I want to ask you, all of you, about, you can start about how vibrant a writing scene does it feel in Israel or in Tel Aviv?
There has been for, you know, since Israel exists for 60-something years, there has been a big writing scene and successful, you know, there are many names known over the world. But what we loved about the opportunity with this noir published in the US is to let American readers read some of the new voices that are exciting for us in Israel that we've known for a while, but didn't have the chance to be translated to English. So there is a very vibrant scene in Israel, and I think also another kind of angle for the previous question was, and it also relates to this one, is by choosing the different writers and different styles, you kind of know that they will give it their flavor of noir and show their strength. So for example, we have one writer, Gadi Taub, who's written a novel and then a TV series about the stripper clubs in Tel Aviv, in the south of Tel Aviv. And we just told him, you know, go for it. And of course, this is a subject that he's very excited about and involved in. So he gave us a wonderful story that begins the collection. And another one, Alex Epstein, just to give another example, he writes this very short, concise, kind of magic realism type of stories. So he wrote a short story about death, going into the character death, going into a bar in Tel Aviv just moments before it explodes in a suicide bomb attack. So in this way, we managed to both show the diversity of the different voices that we have here, that we have in Tel Aviv, and also still touch on the noir side of things.
Yeah. In Tehran, is there you were talking about the censorship and the restrictions. Is there a vibrant writing scene even within that?
There is, because it can't be helped, because Persian classical literature is one of the great classical literatures of the world, as is Chinese, for instance. So we actually live under the weight of that sometimes. It's a weight that we have to contend with. I've talked about.
You mean even as a child growing up learning that? And
yes, and also its influence on the world. I've talked about this before. At the end of the last century, the best-selling English poet of the world was the translations of Omar Khayyam, and in the last quarter century again, and it's another Persian. So a Persian has to live with the weight of classicism, and at the same time deal with the issues of the day, which are very real, and you have to, in order to break that bridge, in order to and connect with the world, you need translators. You need people such as myself who are in between worlds, or like Cheryl, for instance. And that's hard for a place like Iran because of what's been going on in the past 30 years. And so I had a lot of different issues to contend with, but the compilation came out really well because I went beyond just the writers. There's some excellent professional writers here, but there are war correspondents in there, there are crime beat writers, journalists do a great job with noir. So I really went wide and I worked with them. And the last story in the piece that kind of finishes it actually takes place in Los Angeles, but by an Iranian-American writer, because a lot of Iranians after the revolution went to Los Angeles, and it's called Tehrangeles now. So, and that's the only story in the collection that's actually not straight realism.
So you took a little creative. So you had a big group of writers to pick from, I guess.
Fairly big right now because Singapore is a very young country. We're only 49 years old, and so the lit scene is fairly new, and it's really blossoming right now. The poetry scene especially is really booming right now in Singapore. What you're seeing is a country that started out going, okay, we have to focus on the serious things like business, law, science, etc. And now they're like, oh wait, let's try our hand at writing as well. So so it's very exciting. Having said that, the writers that I have, they're really sort of the cream of the crop in Singapore. 3 of them are winners of the Singapore Lit Prize, which is the country's Pulitzer Prize. And they're really wonderful writers. A lot of them published in Singapore and also the UK, but their books rarely made it over to the US. So this is kind of a first taste of Sing Lit at its best right now.
All right. Well, it's a great series. It's a great way to travel, whether you sit at home and read it or whether you take it on the plane with you. Cheryl Tan, Assaf Gavron, and Salar Abdoh. Thank you all 3 very much.
Thank you.